Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Conscious Grief Series 5. Today, I am joined by, now I can say, good friend, Caro Brookings, who is known as the Suicide Bereavement Coach. Welcome back, Caro.
Thank you.
It's so lovely to be with you and to share about your work. So maybe you'd like to just begin with sharing about how you came to be a suicide bereavement coach.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking. So I lost my dear mom to suicide now. It was 10 years ago, November of 2013. So when I first lost my mom, I struggled with all the things that other suicide loss survivors can relate to, the guilt. I felt some anger, the whys, the what ifs, the should ifs, the could ifs. I fall asleep at night hoping and praying I dream about my mom because I figure it was the only way I could be with her now. I used to play what I call this game in my head where if I thought if I can go back in time only once, what would I do? How could I save her? So there was a lot of struggles going on. I was in my last year of university, so tried to get that done and graduate, and there was just a lot going on, and I just really tried my hardest to get through the days. I went to see my GP. I went to SOBS meetings in the UK. Just tried all the different things, and nothing seemed to work. And I started to think, okay, what's wrong with me? People say do these things, and I was ticking all of the boxes and giving it time, and just nothing seemed to work. And that was until my first daughter was born. So that was in February of 2018. And that's when things really shifted for me, because it wasn't just me and my husband anymore. We had this precious baby girl, and more than ever, it really hit me that, okay, my mum took her life. Her mum actually suffered from severe depression, was treated in and out of hospital. So, I thought before, kind of, what does it mean for me? But now I was like, okay, what does this mean for my daughter? And that's when I realized I wanted to change that generational curse. So, when they're little and they feed a lot, you spend a lot of time on the sofa, I started to research different healing strategies. And there's a lot out there, so it can get quite confusing. And again, I tried the different things, but it just felt like either it was something that worked for one person, but it didn't work for me, or it was something that was just made up in a vacuum. So I was looking and kept looking, and eventually I came across a program where I learned all about how the brain works and how we can recognize and challenge untrue and unhelpful thoughts, negative self-talk. And that was really the game changer for me. So I went through the program, and through challenging my thoughts and finding self-compassion, I was able to let go of my guilt, let go of my anger, be present for my loved ones. It had such a huge impact on me that I thought, okay, I want to do more with this, because it was apparent right from the start that there's not, still to this day, not enough support out there for us suicide loss survivors. So I wanted to change that. I wanted to offer something, but it was important for me that I didn't just have the experience of losing my mom. I wanted to understand how I could support people. So that's when I completed the neurocoaching certification, which was basically all the behind the scenes stuff and in and out of the program that I was taking. So I knew how it all fitted together. And then I started working with people, working with groups, working with individuals, hosting interview series, support series, all kinds of different things. So that's really something there for everyone. But yeah, that's in a nutshell how I got to where I am today.
So you are now a certified neuro coach, and this is what helped basically rewire your brain. And I loved what you shared about how it helps with the negative self-talk. And also how it's like shifted you from this concern that you would also get the same depression that your mum got and your grandmother got, which is so powerful. You know, it's helped you in your grief for your mum, but it's also, you know, given you the sort of strength and hope that you've got these powerful tools now to save yourself from that, you know, and you've broken that generational curse, as you said.
Mhm.
And with your clients, I know that you work individually and you also work in groups. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And what would you say? I mean, as you are very specific in terms of suicide loss, um, it must be incredibly empowering or, you know, helpful for people to be in a group with other people who have got the same loss, because there is, you know, as you say, stigmas around suicide or like different levels of guilt or shame, or and the ruminating can be even more strong than grief of somebody from other situations. So what would you say about suicide loss and the difference between other losses?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there with especially the stigma that is attached to suicide and suicide loss still to this day. And I think it's largely because of the ignorance of the general population. We still have a lot of educating to do. And I always say it's a bit strange when you think about it, that we're the ones who are struggling and we're the ones who are grieving, and then yet it also seems to fall on us to, you know, say to someone else, you know, depending on where we are in our journey, well, you know, this is not a helpful comment, or, you know, just to debunk some of those myths that are going around suicide loss. And the thing that I always, you know, tell my clients and people that I work with is that people judge. People always judge, but we can decide whether we take it on or not. And I always say, you know, what other people say and do, it reflects back on them, and it doesn't mean anything about us or our loved ones. So I hope that we're going to be able to remove the stigma around suicide loss for good at some stage. Whether it's going to be in my lifetime or not, I don't know. But even if we as suicide loss survivors can know and believe deep down, okay, you know, even when there's people who are making unhelpful comments, it doesn't mean anything about me, and I can find my people who understand and who can support me.
Yeah, thank you very much for clarifying that. And would you be open to sharing a bit more about your mum as she was to you as a mum and your relationship with her?
Yeah, sure. So my mum and I would generally, you know, had a great mother-daughter relationship, and I'm sort of thinking back to when I was a child. You know, some of the memories that I have with her is at Christmas time. We used to bake Christmas cookies and listen to Christmas music or do crafts, things like that. I remember, you know, going to town with her quite regularly, and we would, you know, have a look around, maybe buy some clothes or have some fast food or something, you know, just spending time with her. And she was always there for me. She was always really supportive, and she always believed in me and my dreams, you know, as I had different ideas of what I wanted to do with my life, where some people may have been a bit more skeptical, let's say. My mom was always, oh no, you know, she's gonna do her thing. So she was, I would say, my number one cheerleader. And you know, even as I grew up in Germany, or my family still live in Germany, and I went to university in the UK, so we lived in different countries, but my mom always made sure to, you know, keep the contact, and we would call each other maybe twice a week and have a chat. And she came to see me a couple of times visited, and we went exploring different places. So yeah, I can now looking back, 10 years ago, I was only 23. And I think when you're 23, talking about myself, I didn't have the maturity level to, realize what it means to be a mom, and, the sacrifices that she made and the way that she showed up for me, which I think is a bit of a shame. But now when I'm a mom myself, I often think back to all of the things she did, and I'm able to appreciate them even more. And, I believe that we still got a connection to our loved ones. So I'm able to, talk to my mom or write to my mom and just, tell her how much I appreciated the things that she did, and how much more I understand now maybe some of the challenges that she was facing.
Thank you so much for giving us more of an idea about your relationship. It's really lovely to hear about her. What's your mum's name?
Karin.
Arlene.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, talking about now you're a mum of two girls.
3 now.
Oh.
Yeah, 2 girls and a boy.
Oh my gosh, Caro, that a lot happened in a short space of time. And how our grief changes, as we go through, you're going through the milestone of motherhood, and, they don't have their grandma. You don't have your mum to call up and ask about, what do I do when, or did I do this when I was a baby, and things like that. So how do you find your grief as time goes on?
Yeah, like you say, it certainly changes. And, I say to people, the grief is always with us, but it always changes over time. So you're right. Again, I was 23 and a half when my mom took her life. So we didn't really have conversations around pregnancy and motherhood. I was at uni, I was living my life. When you're at that age, again, talking about me, I didn't really think about these things. Kids weren't on my mind yet. So I found later, as we were going through some things, I found a little booklet though, which had like information about her pregnancy with me and when her due date was, and some stuff like that, which was nice to find. But yeah, you're right. It's like not having her there with me during my pregnancies, during birth, and now sort of, saying, okay, what do you think? What would you do? I often wonder, what would my mum do now? And like you say, what was I like as a child? Was I similar to them, or all of these things are certainly sharp. But I make a point of, again, keeping that connection with my mom going. So it took me, that's sort of one of the last things I was able to do. It took me 7.5 years to have pictures up of my mom because it was too painful beforehand. But now I've got the pictures up when especially my girls who are a little bit, well, and I say a little bit old, they're still very young, but they come into, my office, and they look at the picture, and, in the beginning they would ask, oh, who is this? And I said, oh, it's my mom, and we'd have kind of conversations around, who she was, what we would do together, and that she's not with us anymore. So they know that she existed, and they know how much she meant to me, and they're so sweet. I mean, they're only like 4 and 5, but they say, oh, were you sad when your mom died? And, just such sweet, innocent, but quite profound questions to ask, by such a young person. But yeah, it definitely, in a nutshell, losing my mom when I did it has definitely changed the trajectory in my life in so many ways, in all areas of my life, really.
We were not dissimilar in age, actually, because my mum died when I was 21. And like you know, I was in the middle of my degree at university, and I wanted to just kind of put it in a box and not, you know, I also didn't have pictures around and things like that. But my sister, who's got 3 children, like you're doing now, she's been very good at like incorporating our parents into their lives. So they will talk about them like nanny, nana, and granddad. And you know, my sister will say, oh, you really are like your grandma, or you're like your grandpa, and things like that. And it's really sweet because they do know our parents, and that also continues the memory. You know, they know that, for example, one of my dad's favorite songs was The Gambler by Kenny Rogers, and they know all of the words to the song because my sister will will play it. And so it's kind of amazing how through the next generation, when we've sort of processed more of our grief and our pain, and that we can share about them, and their memory lives on in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, you know, when you said that your sister will say, oh, you're so much like your grandma or your grandpa, you know, when and I still see it in my eldest sometimes now, but I remember the first time I noticed it, she was only 6 months and I was pushing her around the pusher and she was wearing the hat, so you could only sort of see her face. And I looked at her and I thought she looks so much like my mum in the face. And I still sometimes look at her now, and I've got a picture I find of my mum when she was maybe, you know, 7 or 8 or something like that. And it's just uncanny, the similarity when you think about, you know, how the genes have mixed up over the generations for her to look so much like my mum. But I think it's lovely. It's just a lovely reminder that she's always with us and within us.
Yeah, it truly, truly is. And sometimes with my sister's kids, I feel like they're channeling my mum. Like they'll say something and I think, oh my gosh, that feels like a message from my mum, you know. So it is really special. But going back to your work and working with people, you know, with suicide loss, what would you say with the neuro coaching are some of the most powerful tools? Because that sort of the ruminating is what is so difficult, I feel like. And how does the neuro coaching untangle some of that?
Yeah, good question. So, like I mentioned earlier, it's really starts with our thoughts. So, brain scans have shown us that the thought center of the brain fires microseconds before the emotional center of the brain, which means that even when we've got a change in emotion, we usually notice it first, but actually there's a thought that comes first, which is really powerful because the other thing to realize is that we can choose our thoughts. So, you know, when we sat there ruminating, there's certain thoughts that are going through our minds. And I remember before I learned all of this, I felt really trapped because I didn't know any of that. And I had these really unhelpful thoughts going through my mind. And I thought, okay, my thoughts are me. And I didn't think I had any control over those thoughts. So that was a big revelation for me to know, okay, I can actually choose my thoughts. And it's not just like saying, oh, think a different thought and off you go. There's a whole process around that. But it really starts by recognizing our thoughts, firstly, our thoughts in general, because, you know, people go through their day and they're not even aware of what they're thinking. Or in a case of suicide loss, if we've got these ruminations, we are painfully aware of what we're thinking, but we tend to believe our thoughts. We tend to believe everything we think and say to ourselves. So the next step, once we know that, you know, we've got these thoughts, is to know that not all of our thoughts are true and are helpful. So one really powerful step is when we've got those thoughts, especially the ruminating thoughts, the should haves and could haves, you know, to start writing them down with pen and paper. It activates different areas of the brain. We can pull things out from our subconscious more easily, which is also crucial because about 95% of what we do is driven by our subconscious. So, it's really driven by, without our knowledge or permission. It just, and I don't want to get too technical, but basically the brain always wants to be as efficient as possible. So if we think thoughts over and over again, the brain will automate these thoughts to save energy. And that's when they go into our subconscious. So we're not even aware of them, but they're a deciding factor in everything we do. So going back to, for example, the should haves and could haves, once we've written those thoughts down, again, on a very simple level for the purpose of this interview, we can start challenging those thoughts. So, for example, the should haves and could haves, you can ask yourself questions like, can I be absolutely sure that if I had done whatever, the should have or could have was, that it would have made a difference, not just in that moment, but also in the longer term? Or, would have it been reasonable to expect to do whatever that should have or could have was, bearing in mind that in that moment, we didn't know what was about to happen? Because what happens is we look at everything, once we've known that our loved one is taken their life, we look into the past wearing a different lens, knowing what has happened, but then we've got this unrealistic expectation of, okay, well, I should have done this and that differently. And I did it the same myself, so I totally get it. But we can really come from a place of self-compassion because we didn't know these things at the time. And then once we've challenged some of those untrue and unhelpful thoughts, we can then refute them and rewrite more helpful, more positive thoughts. So, often people, especially parents, feel like they failed their child. So if they feel like they're a failure, that would be an untrue and unhelpful thought. So they can challenge that and then turn it into a more positive statement. So I always say, okay, think about what you did do to support your child or your loved one, because the brain always focuses on the negatives. It focuses on what we didn't do or what we feel like we did wrong. But there's all of these things on the other side that we did do to support our loved ones. They're all there, but our brain won't go there automatically. It takes a conscious effort. So it can be really powerful, for example, to write down all the things that we did do to support our loved one. And then, depending on how far someone wants to take it, if they start ruminating and they're going through the should haves and could haves, they could, read through that list and remind themselves of, okay, these are actually the things that I did do. And there'll be a lot once you get going. You'll be able to come up with a lot. Or you could take it a step further and get out a voice recorder on your phone and record a list of all of the statements, and then listen to it first thing in the morning when you first wake up and last thing at night just before you go to sleep. And that helps the whole rewiring process.
Amazing. Thank you, Caro. That's, so interesting. And when you work with people in your group program, like how does that look? Like how many people in a group, how many weeks, how long are each session? How do you manage to coach people like this in a group?
Yeah. So the group is something I started last year, and I'm really happy with how it's going. So initially, people sign up for a year, but knowing how helpful they're finding it, I'm confident that it's going to be an ongoing offering. I keep the group small, so I usually have around up to 10 people in a group, and then they really get to know each other very well. And I'm mindful with who I put together in the groups. And then, like you said at the beginning, it's so powerful because there's a lot of advantages to the one-on-one coaching, because we can go really deep and it's easier to hold people accountable and maybe talk about some more personal stuff. But then there's so much power to the group because people realize, that they're not the only ones struggling with whatever is coming up for them. I can say to them, I've heard that before and you're not the only one, but to have other people there sharing the same experiences and being there, cheering each other on and supporting each other is really powerful. So there's a few different elements to that. So we always go to a group coaching session where, people can be coached on whatever is going on for them. And I can give my input, but then always the other people in the group might have some ideas or personal experiences around that. We've got a book club, which I love, and that's when I bring in some of the spirituality and mindfulness and being present in the moment. So we're currently reading books by Michael Singer, so The Untethered Soul, Living Untethered. And I really love to combine, it's not just the grieving part, but it's also the, okay, what's next? What's my purpose? And, each and every one of us, we don't just struggle with our griefs, but we've all got other challenges going on in life. So I love putting that all together. We also got topic sessions where I pick a certain topic that I know people struggle with, and we go through it more, I guess, systematically. So there's a worksheet and we sort of start with the struggle, and by the end of it, we have a plan of how to move forward from it. And then we've also got grief yoga and breathwork session where you come in and you do an amazing job. My ladies always really look forward to your sessions. And again, for me, it's all about, having this holistic approach where there's a bit of everything all coming together.
Amazing, Caro. I love that, what you've created. And I love the idea of the book as well. And Michael Singer's books. Wow, they are amazing. Yeah, really transformative stuff. When as you know, with these interviews, I always like to ask people how you would define conscious grief.
Yeah. So for me, like I mentioned earlier, the conscious part of the brain and the subconscious part of the brain. So as a reminder, 95% of what we do is driven by our subconscious. So for me, conscious grief is about being more aware of our thoughts and not letting our unconscious, our subconscious thoughts sort of run the show. So it's about being more mindful, writing down what comes up for us, so we're able to change our thoughts and change our story going forward. Because once we're able to pull out these things that lurk in the subconscious, then we can actually refute them, rewire our brains and do something about it. So for me, it's all about having that awareness of how it's affecting us.
Yeah, thank you for that. And if somebody who's watching right now has recently been through a suicide loss, what would be your message to them today?
Okay, so I would say, the first year, really, it's all very early days. So give yourself lots of grace. But it's never too early to start working through the grief, whatever comes up. Because I always say time doesn't heal all wounds. So, when someone finds me or my group or whatever it is early, then I'm always grateful because they can be given the tools. Also know that all of your feelings are valid. So you might have feelings that you're uncomfortable with, whether it's, maybe you're angry with your loved one and you feel uncomfortable with that because they're not here anymore. Or maybe you feel envious when you see, your friends or maybe some family members celebrating milestone achievements and your loved one isn't there. They don't get to celebrate those same achievements. Just know that everything you're feeling is valid. And then I always say it's never too early to start paying attention to our thoughts. That's really the first step. Anyone can do it. You don't need any special knowledge or equipment. Just start paying attention to your thoughts and know that just because you're thinking something doesn't mean it's true, it doesn't mean it's helpful, and sort of take it from there.
Thank you so much, Caro. It's really helpful.
Mm.
Well, we are at the end of our interview, but you have a gift for our viewers and listeners. So perhaps you'd like to tell them about that.
Yeah, sure. So it's the Goodbye Guilt Guide. And I basically go into more detail, sort of with step-by-step instructions of what I talked about today, you know, the recognizing the thoughts, how to do the refute, how to do the rewire. So yeah, it's a little workbook where you have step-by-step instructions of going from recognizing the thoughts to how you can then rewire your brain.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, this has been so good to see you, and I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing in the world, Caro. So thank you very, very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
And thank you to everybody who's been listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.